15 years. That's how long I'd poured myself into building correlatic systems. 15 years of 2 a.m. coding marathons, investor charm offensives, sleepless product launches, and steady, ruthless innovation. Correlytics wasn't just a company. It was me, my vision, my grit, my blood in the circuit board. So when Miles stood at the head of that glass-walled boardroom and uttered the words, "Effective immediately, Serena Quinn is relieved of her duties as CEO," the floor might as well have caved in beneath me. My name echoed in my ears, but the rest of his speech blurred into white noise. My eyes darted from board member to board member. Most of them avoided my gaze. Cowards. Some had been with me since the first round of funding. I noticed Roger fidgeting with his Montblanc pen, Mary looking down at her lap, unable to meet my stare. They had known. They had all known this was coming. But the real knife, the one that turned in my gut, was Delilah. She stood beside Miles like she belonged there. Shoulder-length waves perfectly styled, lips painted that smug shade of red I used to wear in investor meetings. I had mentored her, handpicked her from a startup incubator 4 years ago. She was hungry, yes, but I thought she was loyal. I had taught her everything. And now here she was, slipping into my seat like she'd earned it. "We believe fresh leadership is needed," Delilah said smoothly, her voice a performance in calculated calm. "And we're excited to usher in a new era for Correlytics. New era. My company. My legacy." And she spoke like I was an outdated operating system being deleted. I looked at Miles. He wouldn't meet my eyes either. That used to be my husband. The man who swore we were building this dream together. The man who told me he loved my mind most of all. Turns out he loved it enough to steal everything I built with it. "I see," I said, standing slowly. My chair made a scraping sound that echoed too loud in the sterile silence. I straightened my blazer, my fingers calm even though my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might split my ribs open. No one moved. No one breathed. "Thank you for your time," I said, my voice cool. Controlled. I would not break here. Not in front of these vultures. I walked to the door, heels tapping like a metronome. As I reached for the handle, I paused, just for a second, and looked over my shoulder. "You'll regret this," I said. Not a threat. A promise. Then I left. The whole way outside was quiet, almost sacred in its stillness. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I walked past the display wall where our awards were mounted, awards that had my name on them. Past the framed news clippings that quoted me when Correlytics landed its first military-grade contract. Past the interns who were too afraid to look me in the eye. I kept walking until I was in the parking garage, the heat clinging to my skin like sweat under armor. I sat in my car for a long time. No music. No air conditioning. Just silence. My hands rested on the steering wheel, but my eyes stared forward, unblinking. Not at the exit ramp. Not at the world beyond it. But at the reflection in my rearview mirror. I didn't look defeated. I looked dangerous. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not broke, no. Something broke in that boardroom, sure. But what took its place wasn't weakness. It was clarity. Cold, surgical clarity. The kind I'd seen in the eyes of every CEO who'd ever survived a hostile takeover and came back to buy the building their enemies worked in. I didn't have a plan yet, but I would. And when I did, it wouldn't be petty. It would be precise. Devastating. Final. I drove away from Correlytics without looking back. By the time I got home, Miles had already sent me a text. "Let's talk when you're ready." This wasn't personal. Not personal. The audacity of that man. He stole my company and served it to my protege like a platter of revenge. I didn't reply. I just sat on the couch, took a deep breath, and opened my laptop. The patent. They'd forgotten one thing. I still own the patent to the predictive engine that powered Correlytics' flagship product. I had protected it like a mother protects her child. Filed it under my name, locked under my private account, separate from company ownership. They couldn't launch without it. Couldn't grow. Couldn't move. And I wasn't going to give it up. As I stared at the digital blueprint glowing on my screen, my hand hovered over the trackpad. Miles and Delilah thought they'd won, that they could erase me from my own story. But they just turned the first page of my comeback. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't smash anything, even though every inch of my body pulsed with the need to release the fury building beneath my skin. Instead, I called Carmen Sinclair. Carmen had once been my rival, a woman with the same steel spine and sleepless ambition I possessed. We'd sparred for contracts, danced around each other at tech summits, and once nearly ended up on opposite sides of a patent war. But beneath all that fire, there was mutual respect. Carmen played chess, not checkers, and she knew what it meant when I called her the same day I was ousted from Corelytics. She answered on the third ring. "Serena," she said, voice sharp as ever. I heard the news. Of course she had. Carmen didn't wait for press releases. She had eyes everywhere. "I want in," I said simply. "Whatever you're building over there at Nova Forge, I want a piece. Not just a desk and a title. I want real power." A pause, then a low hum of consideration. "You sound calm." "I'm done being calm," I said. "I'm calculating now." Carmen laughed softly, but it wasn't cruel. It was appreciative. "Then let's get to work." I told her everything. Not the emotional bits. She didn't need to know that my marriage had crumbled in the same breath as my company. I kept it clinical. The facts, the mechanics, the betrayal, the key players, Delilah's inexperience, Miles' hunger for control, and most importantly, the patent. The predictive engine that Corelytics needed to survive was still mine, registered under my name, protected and undisputed. She whistled low. "So the heart of the machine still beats in your hands." "Exactly," I said. "They can't launch the Horizon update without it." They probably didn't even realize that when they pushed me out. Carmen didn't speak for a long moment. Then, "Come in tomorrow. I'll have legal ready." "You're not going to be an employee, Serena. You're going to be an architect." Those words ignited something in me. Not just hope, purpose, control. "I want a title that reflects that," I said, letting just enough steel enter my voice. "Chief Innovation Officer. And you'll lead the predictive division we've been prepping for months." That was supposed to go to someone else, but I like your fire better. I smiled. A small, dangerous thing. Good. Because I'm not coming to sit quietly. I'm coming to dismantle Corelytics. "I'd expect nothing less," Carmen said. "Now tell me, who can we bring over with you?" I paused. My mind spun through names. Not all of them would come. Some were too scared, too bound to their bonuses and stock options. But others? The loyal ones? The ones who believed in me? "I'll reach out," I said. "Quietly. We'll move like ghosts. By the time Miles and Delilah realize what's happening, we'll be halfway through the front door." We ended the call with a verbal handshake, and for the first time in what felt like weeks, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It had begun. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The edges of my rage were sharpening into strategy. I could see the battlefield forming in my mind. Carmen would give me the army, but the war? That was mine to lead. Later that night, I drafted a list, my inner circle. The ones who had built Corelytics with me from the ground up. Tanya, my lead developer. Jordan, head of UX, and one of the few people who never wavered in a meeting. Wesley, who once slept in the office for 3 days to deliver a demo build on time. I didn't reach out via email. That would have been too obvious. I sent encrypted messages, short and direct. "I have a new plan. If you're ready to build again with me, let's talk." Responses started trickling in by midnight. Every single one said yes. Miles had the board. Delilah had the title. But I had the soul of the company in my corner, and they were ready to follow me anywhere. I poured myself a glass of wine, not to relax, but to mark the beginning. This wasn't vengeance for vengeance's sake. It was reclamation. Of my work. My vision. My legacy. They thought they'd exiled me. But in truth, they'd only freed me. By the time dawn crept over the city skyline, I had Carmen's executive offer in my inbox, 3 follow-up meetings scheduled with department heads ready to defect, and a 2-page draft of a strategic roadmap. I wasn't just coming back. I was coming to conquer. When I walked through the front door of our home that evening, Miles was already in the kitchen, swirling a glass of scotch like he was the king of something. The smell of his expensive cologne lingered in the air, sharp and cloying. He didn't look surprised to see me, probably assumed I'd spent the day sulking, licking my wounds like a broken dog. He turned to me with a practiced smirk, leaning one hip against the marble counter like he hadn't just betrayed me hours ago. "Hey," he said casually as if nothing had changed. "Rough day?" I didn't answer right away. I hung my coat slowly, deliberately, letting the silence stretch between us. My heels echoed against the tiles as I moved toward the kitchen, noting the 2 glasses on the counter. He'd poured one for me. That was bold. Or stupid. "I suppose congratulations are in order," I said evenly, taking the glass but not drinking. I swirled it, mimicking his movements. It felt more like a performance than a marriage now. He chuckled, took a sip, and shrugged. "Come on, Serena. You had to know something was coming. The board's been restless. You were stretched thin. Stretched thin. That's what they called innovation now. That's what they called sacrificing sleep, love, health for 15 years. I gave them everything," I said quietly. "I built Corelytics from a basement idea into a global force. You helped, yes. But you didn't build it. I did." His smile faltered, just a hair. "You were great, Serena. You are great. But this is bigger than just you." "Clearly," I said, setting the untouched glass down. "You've made sure of that." He shifted uncomfortably, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of further confrontation. That wasn't why I was here tonight. The war wasn't going to be fought with screaming matches and broken dishes. No, this was a chess game, and tonight I moved my queen into position. I went upstairs, past the framed wedding photo that now looked like a cruel joke, and into my office. I closed the door, locked it, and opened my laptop. My fingers danced across the keyboard as I initiated the first of many quiet actions. I accessed archived Corelytics databases, files I had created, maintained, and kept buried beneath layers of encryption. Not a steal, no, I wasn't a thief. But I knew what they'd taken. And I also knew what they hadn't yet figured out. The predictive engine that Miles and Delilah were so eager to launch was missing key algorithmic parameters, ones only I had access to. Their rushed beta would collapse without them. Worse, the parameters had dependencies buried so deep in the code that any attempt to recreate them from scratch would crash the entire model. I began documenting everything: version discrepancies, flaws in their latest builds, missed license renewals, contract clauses they'd overlooked in their greed. I didn't touch anything that would incriminate me. This wasn't sabotage. This was evidence. Truth. And truth had a funny way of setting things on fire when exposed to light. Next, I opened a secure server I'd maintained since the beginning of Corelytics. A backup of backups. All the design notes, meeting recordings, prototype iterations, everything that proved where the innovation came from. My fingerprints were everywhere. Then I moved on to the people. Tanya responded first. "Tell me where and when." Wesley's message came next. "You're the only reason I stayed as long as I did. I'm in." Jordan sent an emoji, a raised fist, and a simple "let's go." One by one, they reaffirmed what I already knew: loyalty doesn't live in boardrooms. It lives in trenches, in late nights, and shared failures. The people who had built Corelytics with me were ready to walk away from everything because they trusted me to build something better. I sent out instructions. No dramatic exits. No confrontations. We would leave silently, swiftly, and all at once. On Friday, for PM sharp, we'd walk out the doors of Corelytics together. Not in protest, but in promise. Over the next 2 days, we prepared. Quiet resignations were written and dated, but not submitted. Personal items were packed in phases. Company devices were cleaned, files backed up ethically and legally. Every step we took was calculated and clean. No one would be able to accuse us of espionage or sabotage. We weren't stealing. We were shedding. Each night, I returned home to Miles pretending to be warm. He'd offer wine, ask if I'd thought about finding something new. Delilah's name was never mentioned, though her perfume clung to his shirts like a confession. I played the role of tired, confused, and defeated. Let him believe I was broken. Let him believe he'd won. And all the while, I sharpened my blade. By Thursday night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying the woman staring back. She didn't look like a victim. She didn't look like a woman discarded. She looked ready. Friday was coming. And with it, the first real strike. The elevator ride to the top floor of Correlytics felt different that morning. It wasn't dread or anxiety swimming in my gut, it was clarity. Cold, focused, unwavering. I stood in the elevator with Tanya, her expression calm, jaw set like steel. Behind us, Jordan adjusted his glasses, nodding silently. We had all agreed, no theatrics. No outbursts. Just precision. It was 8:47 a.m. on Friday. I walked through the lobby like I had every day for 15 years, but today my heels echoed differently on the polished floor. Each step felt final. The receptionist, new girl, fresh out of some internship program Delilah had probably championed, gave me a cautious smile. I returned it with a nod. She wouldn't last. Not when the storm hit. I made it to my old office, still untouched, as if no one had dared to erase me yet. Or maybe Delilah had plans to redesign it after her little power parade. Let her dream. She had no idea the countdown was already ticking down to 0. At 4 p.m. On the dot, we'd walk. But first, we'd let them stew in the illusion of control a little longer. I settled in at a guest desk beside Tanya and spent the day pretending. Pretending to consult. Pretending to review documents. Pretending to play nice with a company that had gutted me. But underneath, my real work was already done. Everything I needed was safely archived, legal, above board, but damning. And by Monday, the world would know the truth. Correlytics without me was a malfunctioning machine, a house of glass built on my foundation. The hours crawled forward. At lunch, I caught Delilah peering over from the executive floor. She was dressed like a magazine cover, too much red, too much smug. She whispered something to Miles, who turned toward me and tried to offer that same charming smile he used to pull out when he wanted to diffuse tension between us. I didn't blink. I didn't smile back. I didn't give him a single breath more than he deserved. I had given these people everything. Time. Innovation. Loyalty. And all they gave me in return was betrayal and a seat outside my own empire. So now I would take everything they had left. At 3:45 p.m., Tanya sent the signal, one word in our encrypted chat. Ready. One by one, the responses flooded in. Jordan. Wesley. Amira. Devin. 32 people. 32 brilliant minds. All prepared to rise from the ashes with me. At exactly 4 p.m., I stood. The motion was small, quiet. But in a room full of loyal eyes, it was a command. Tanya rose next. Then Jordan. Then the others. A wave of movement, silent and powerful, swept across the office floor. People looked up. Confused. Some whispered. Some stared. No one spoke. We walked in sync, our footsteps a quiet march toward freedom. By the time we reached the lobby, the tension in the air had thickened. One of the junior VPs rushed toward us, papers fluttering in his hands. Serena, wait. What's going on? Why is everyone? I stopped just long enough to look him in the eyes. You'll find out soon. And we stepped out the front doors. Into the light. Into something new. The moment we cleared the glass double doors of Correlytics, it was done. The exodus had begun. The spine of the company had left the building. We gathered at a nearby rooftop lounge Carmen had reserved for the occasion. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the skyline, casting golden streaks over the city. Carmen stood waiting with flutes of champagne and the kind of smile that said she'd just witnessed the start of a revolution. She raised her glass. To Serena Quinn, the founder they tried to erase, the mind they couldn't replace. A quiet murmur of cheers rose among my team. I didn't smile, not yet. I was still holding my breath, waiting for Monday. Waiting for the second domino to fall. But I raised my glass just the same. To building something better, I said. Together. The next day passed in quiet anticipation. News hadn't broken yet. Correlytics was still basking in their imagined victory. But by Monday morning, that silence would become chaos. And it did. At 9:02 a.m. sharp, NovaForge released the press statement. NovaForge Technologies announces new predictive division, led by former Correlytics founder Serena Quinn. Acquires exclusive licensing rights to proprietary predictive tech. Launch of Phoenix engine imminent. The reaction was immediate. Emails started flooding into my new inbox. Investors, clients, former partners. Congratulating. Applauding. Asking to be part of the next phase. But the real chaos was happening back at Correlytics. By 10 a.m., major clients had pulled out, citing internal misalignment and loss of critical innovation leadership. By noon, headlines were circulating, Correlytics hit by leadership exodus. Predictive tech legally tied to rival firm. I watched it all from the NovaForge executive suite, Carmen beside me, her fingers drumming thoughtfully against her chair. You lit the match, she said. Now, let's watch them burn. I didn't say anything. I just kept watching. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. The fall came faster than even I had predicted. By Monday afternoon, the Correlytics stock had begun its slow nosedive, sliding down the tickers like water leaking from a cracked pipe. First, it was a dip, 2.3%. Then came the media flurry, headlines swarming like bees. Correlytics rocked by executive walkout, NovaForge strikes blow with Serena Quinn's return, and the one that made me smirk behind my coffee mug, founder fired, now fires back. I didn't need to dig through the data to know what was happening inside those glass walls I once called home. Investors were calling. Legal was scrambling. And at the heart of it all, Miles and Delilah were discovering, in real time, that the product they had gambled their entire takeover on was off limits. The predictive engine was mine. Legally. Irrevocably. They had overlooked the one clause in our founding documents that made it crystal clear. All algorithmic patents developed under my name prior to series of funding remained under personal ownership unless formally transferred. I never transferred. I never had to. And no one had read the fine print because no one expected to ever need to. Until now. Carmen's legal team had filed a cease and desist by noon, served directly to Correlytics headquarters. The Horizon update, their crown jewel, was dead in the water unless they could rebuild it from scratch. And they couldn't. Not in time. Not with what they had. I received 3 missed calls from Miles by early afternoon. Then a 4th. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence was my answer. Let him stew. Let him wonder what card I'd play next. He didn't deserve my voice. Instead, I focused on NovaForge. Carmen had carved out a war room for me. Glass walls, minimalistic design, white boards already filled with diagrams. My team moved like a hive, fast and focused. Tanya handled the transition logistics. Jordan was already drafting a rebrand of the predictive engine, now called Phoenix. Wesley had set up the prototype server before lunch. It was like breathing again. Except now I was doing it without someone waiting to cut off my air. I paused only once that day to stand at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office, watching the city stretch beneath me. This was the view of someone who had made it to the other side. Not by accident. Not by luck. By endurance. There was a knock on the door. Carmen stepped inside, a newspaper in her hand. She dropped it on my desk. Front page. There it was. Correlytics plunges after tech walkout. Founder Serena Quinn joins rival firm. They're panicking, she said. Delilah tried to speak to a reporter this morning, claimed you stole the system. We hit back with patent filings, timestamps, witness accounts. It shut down fast. I looked at the photo on the cover. It was me, walking out of Corelytics on Friday, sunglasses on, expression unreadable. The caption beneath it called me the face of innovation redefined. I leaned back. Do they realize yet what's actually happening? Carmen smiled. They're starting to, but it'll get worse. And it did. The next day, Corelytics issued a press statement claiming internal restructuring and new leadership vision, but it was too late. Clients were dropping like dominoes. Contracts that depended on the predictive engine were frozen. And investors? They weren't patient. Their stock tumbled another 12% in a single day. I didn't enjoy watching the company bleed. Not in the way they probably thought I would. But I wasn't sad either. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the truth finally snapping into place like a lock turning. That afternoon, I got an email. It was from Denise Chin, one of the last remaining executives at Corelytics who hadn't taken a side during the coup. Subject: they're falling apart. Thought you'd want to know. She had attached a screenshot, internal messages between board members in full meltdown mode. Arguments over Miles' leadership. Questions about Delilah's experience. And finally, the line that made me close my eyes and breathe in the moment. We never should have forced Serena out. By the end of the week, their remaining CTO resigned. Their new product launch was indefinitely delayed. And Corelytics, the company I built with my bare hands, had gone from a leader in predictive AI to a cautionary tale of corporate greed. Miles tried again. This time, he emailed. Can we talk? Please. Just talk. I deleted it without opening it. He didn't get to talk anymore. The board had gambled on power and won nothing but chaos. Delilah had bet on seduction over substance. And Miles? He had lost everything, his company, his credibility, his access to my mind. Meanwhile, Phoenix was gaining speed. Every media outlet wanted an interview. Carmen fielded the requests. She knew I wasn't ready to speak, not yet. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. Because soon, I wouldn't need to say a word. The results would speak for me. The boardroom was quiet, eerily so. The kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful, but loaded. Corporate dread. The sound of power collapsing. I wasn't there, but I could imagine it perfectly. Miles sitting at the head of the long, polished mahogany table, Delilah at his right like a shadow with lipstick, and all the once silent board members now turning on them with surgical precision. Word had reached me early that morning. Carmen's assistant slid the news across my desk as casually as if she were handing me my coffee. They've called an emergency meeting. The board's voting to remove Miles and Delilah. Thought you'd want to know. Want to know? I wanted to witness it. But this wasn't my stage anymore. I didn't need to be in the room. I'd already played my part. All I had to do now was watch the curtain fall. Carmen walked into my office a few minutes later, her heels tapping smartly across the floor. They're bleeding, she said without preamble. No one's answering their calls. Investors are demanding explanations. The SEC is sniffing around their accounting. That little dummy firm Miles set up? Turns out it was funneling consulting fees back to him and Delilah. Badly hidden, too. I raised a brow. So they weren't just traders. They were sloppy. Greedy, she corrected. And when you mix greed with incompetence, you get exactly what's happening over there now. I should have felt triumphant. Maybe I did, in some small way. But what I really felt was something quieter. Steadier. Justice, not vengeance. Like the ground had finally settled beneath me again. The final vote came in at 10:17 a.m. Miles and Delilah, fired. Removed unanimously. No ceremony. No farewell speech. Just a pair of red-faced, humiliated executives being escorted out by building security. I saw the footage later. Someone leaked a clip to the press, probably an intern with a front-row seat. Miles, stiff in his tailored suit, trying to maintain some shred of dignity as he was led through the lobby. Delilah, heels clacking too fast, face pale and twisted into something that was definitely not the calm, poised image she always projected. By noon, the CEO. Some tired, complicit figurehead the board had appointed after ousting me had resigned too. The message was clear. Coralytics was hollow, gutted from the inside. What remained was an empty shell trying to look alive. Carmen was waiting for me in the executive suite when I returned from lunch, arms crossed and a wicked glint in her eyes. "I've got an offer for you," she said. I leaned against the desk, sipping from my cup. "Let's hear it. I want you to run the entire predictive division. Not just Phoenix. Everything. You built the original engine. You understand its potential better than anyone. It's yours, Serena, if you want it." I took a slow breath. This was it, the moment I reclaimed everything they tried to steal. Not just a title. Not just a company. Power. Ownership. Control. My vision, backed by people who believed in it, not people who pretended to. I nodded once. "I want it." "Good," she said. "The announcement goes out this afternoon." She extended her hand, and we shook, two women who had both been counted out at some point. And both refused to stay down. By the time the press release hit the wires, my phone was exploding. Media outlets. Investors. Former colleagues. Even a few cautious board members who had voted against me months ago, now crawling back like insects toward light. NovaForge appoints Serena Quinn to lead Predictive Division after Coralytics collapse. I didn't need to gloat. The facts did it for me. That night, I stood alone in my office, the city lights stretching wide and golden beyond the windows. I stared out at the skyline, the horizon just starting to blur into dusk. I wasn't just back. I was in charge. Everything they'd tried to dismantle, my name, my legacy, my ideas, had only made me stronger. Smarter. Sharper. And Miles? Delilah? They were footnotes now. At 8:42 p.m., I received another email from Miles. Subject: I was wrong. Please, Serena. Just one conversation. One. I didn't even open it. I moved it to the archive, then clicked block sender. He'd had all the chances in the world. To be loyal. To be honest. To remember who helped build his life from the ground up. Now he had nothing. And I had it all because I'd earned it. Because I never stopped moving even when they pushed me down. Because I was never meant to be anyone's second option. I was always meant to lead. The air inside Coralytics tasted different the second I walked through the doors again. It wasn't nostalgia, it was reclamation. The kind of stillness that comes before a reckoning. My heels clicked against the familiar polished floors, echoing like thunder in the silence of the lobby. Eyes turned as I passed, some widened in disbelief, others dropped immediately, pretending not to stare. But they stared. Of course they did. I was the ghost they'd tried to bury. Now I was the storm at the gates. 2 security guards escorted me, though not for protection. They flanked me with deference, clearing the way as I stepped into the boardroom. This time, I didn't sit at the table. I stood at the head, just as Miles once had when he stripped me of everything. The same room. The same walls. But the woman in front of them now was not the one they'd blindsided. "Good morning," I said, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of the moment press down on them. No one replied. I watched as the department heads filed in, some nervous, some smug, and some entirely unaware of what was coming. Delilah was nowhere to be seen, of course. She wouldn't dare set foot in this building now. Miles? He wouldn't face me again. Not unless he wanted to feel the weight of everything he'd lost staring him down across this table. I placed a manila folder on the table and slid it open, revealing a simple list. Names. Roles. Offenses. Every person who had played a role in the coup, those who schemed, those who signed the vote, and those who sat silent, hoping to weather the storm and profit after the dust cleared. I looked each of them in the eye. You knew what they were doing. You stood by while they gutted this company from the inside. And now? I closed the folder. Now you're done. One by one, I fired them. No theatrics. No raised voices. Just names read from the list, security escorts at the ready, and a line at the elevator that grew longer by the minute. Some protested. Others tried to plead. But most just sat frozen, as if watching the floor vanish beneath their feet. Because they weren't just losing jobs, they were losing the fantasy that power built on betrayal could ever last. By the time the last one was gone, the room felt lighter. Like someone had finally opened the windows and let the rot escape. I stood there a moment longer, staring at the empty chairs. Then I walked out. Carmen met me outside the boardroom. She didn't ask how it went. She didn't need to. I have a press statement ready, she said instead. We'll announce internal restructuring and your full control of the predictive division. We can frame it as stabilization. I shook my head. No. Frame it as what it is. Correction. She nodded, that subtle grin of hers tugging at her mouth. Understood. Later, I walked the halls. The halls I had once sprinted down with prototypes in hand. The glass offices I had designed to encourage transparency, now housing whispers and shifting eyes. Some of the employees looked relieved when they saw me, real smiles, not forced ones. Others looked nervous. I stopped at the engineering floor, where Tanya had once led our innovation team before we all walked out together. The space was quiet now. Most of the real talent had left with me. The ones still here were scrambling to make sense of the chaos. I turned to the floor manager, someone new, someone Delilah had likely installed to oversee operations. You're being reassigned, I said. I'm bringing Tanya back. He opened his mouth to argue, but I was already moving. I wasn't here to manage feelings. I was here to rebuild. Back in my old office, the one I was now reclaiming, I stood by the window and looked out at the city. My reflection stared back in the glass. Older. Harder, but unshaken. I ran a hand over the desk, remembering the nights I'd slept here, the early mornings, the deadlines met with caffeine and adrenaline. There was a knock. I turned to find Miles standing in the doorway. He looked different. Smaller. The suit didn't sit on him the way it used to. The confidence was gone, replaced by something tired. Something desperate. "Serena," he said. Just give me a minute." I didn't flinch. "You shouldn't be here." "I know." He took a breath. "I made a mistake. A huge one. Delilah's gone. The board." I raised a hand, cutting him off. "This isn't a reunion," I said coldly. "You don't get to walk back in just because the house burned down around you." "I thought you'd want to talk," he said, voice small. "I don't," I replied. "And this." I gestured around the office. "This isn't revenge, Miles. This is justice. This is balance restoring itself." He didn't argue. He turned and walked away. I let him. And then I turned back to my desk, sat down in the chair that was mine from the start, and took a long breath. I was home. But more than that, I was in control. And this time, no one would take it from me. His voice came through in the dark, cracked, low and uncertain. I recognized the number before I even pressed play. "Miles." Again. "Serena, it's me. I know you probably won't listen to this. I wouldn't if I were you. But I need to say something. Or at least try." I sat still, the phone glowing in my hand, the city lights stretching far below my penthouse window. The voicemail played on. "You are always the smartest person in the room." I don't even know when I stopped seeing that. When I stopped being worthy of you. Maybe it was when the investors started turning to you instead of me, or when you got that award in Tokyo, and I just felt small next to you. That's not an excuse. I know that. But Delilah, what happened with her, it wasn't about love. It was never about love. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. She wanted power. She wanted your seat. And Serena, I let her use me. I thought I was gaining something. I thought I could take the one thing you seemed to hold above everything else, correlates. But I was wrong. So wrong. I stared at the glass of bourbon untouched beside me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not even sad. Just tired. Miles, the recorded version of me whispered in my mind, from 100 nights ago, when I still believed we were building something together. When I thought he looked at me and saw a partner, not an obstacle. I lost everything, his voice continued. Delilah's gone. She's moved on. Took whatever connections she could and vanished. No one in the industry will take my calls. I'm toxic now. I miss you. Not the empire. Not the office. You. He paused, and I heard a sharp inhale, shaky. If you could find it in yourself to call me back, even just to yell. Just to say something. I'll take it. The message ended. I let the silence stretch, holding my breath as if expecting something more. Some final sentence. Some clue that he understood the depth of what he'd done. But there was nothing. I stared at the phone for another full minute. Then I tapped once. Delete. And just like that, it was gone. I stood from the couch, walked to the kitchen, and poured the bourbon down the sink. I didn't need it. I didn't need anything to numb the moment. Because I wasn't hurting. That was the strange part. A year ago, that message would have broken me. I would have played it again and again, dissecting every word, looking for proof that I wasn't the problem. But now? It felt like watching someone grieve a ship they sank with their own hands. He wanted forgiveness. But I wasn't carrying hate anymore. I wasn't carrying anything. Closure had already arrived, quietly, effectively, and in full. I walked back toward the window and watched the cars threading through the city streets far below. My city. My world. One I'd carved for myself from the ashes of betrayal and self-doubt. There was no pain. Just clarity. Miles was a man who once held my hand at a ribbon-cutting ceremony and whispered that we were unstoppable together. And then, when the tides shifted, he traded me for power. Only now, with nothing left to offer, did he remember the shape of what we'd lost. But that shape didn't exist anymore. I didn't exist the way I had when I loved him. That SERENA. The one who built quietly, who forgave too quickly, who believed love could survive anything, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, sharper, not bitter, not vengeful, just whole. I glanced at the framed photo on my bookshelf, an old press shot of the original Correlytics launch team, Tanya and Wesley both grinning beside me. I remembered how it felt to dream big with people who believed in the same vision. We had that again now at Nova Forge. I wasn't alone. That thought warmed me in a way no apology ever could. My phone buzzed again. Another message. This one from Carmen. Confirmed. Acquisition closes Friday. Press will want quotes from you. I typed back. Let's do it. Simple. Final. I took one last look at the night skyline and turned off the lights. The voicemail was gone. The memory would fade, too. And in its place? Legacy. Because the truth was, I didn't need Miles to validate what I had become. His voice in my ear no longer held power. His regret wasn't my responsibility. He had burned the bridge. And I had built a kingdom from the embers. The flashbulbs fired like lightning across the room. Journalists jostled for position, questions overlapping, pens scribbling furiously, and cameras trained on one woman, me. I stood beneath the Nova Forge banner, its sleek, modern branding stretching above my head, flanked by Carmen Sinclair and 3 top executives. But the moment was mine. Every eye was on me. Every microphone angled toward the stage waited for what I'd say. Not because I had something to prove, but because I already had. Carmen stepped forward first, delivering her remarks with crisp professionalism. We're proud to announce the complete acquisition of Correlytic Systems by Nova Forge Technologies, she said, her voice steady, composed. Effective immediately, all predictive software development, infrastructure, and assets will merge under our new Global Intelligence Division. She paused, looked at me, and smiled. And leading that division will be none other than its original architect, Serena Quinn. The room erupted. Reporters shouted. Flashes blinked wildly, and I took a single breath before stepping to the podium. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The weight of the moment carried its own gravity. 2 years ago, I began, voice calm and firm. Correlatic Systems stood at the forefront of innovation in predictive analytics. It was a company I helped build from the ground up, a company born in my living room, on scribbled napkins and sleepless nights. I scanned the crowd, letting them absorb it. I was removed from that company without warning, without merit, and without ethics. But I didn't crumble. I rebuilt. And today, I return not as a guest, not as a memory, but as its leader. The silence was complete. I didn't gloat. I didn't accuse. The facts were enough. Under NovaForge, I continued, we're launching an entirely new era of predictive technology. What you once knew as Correlytics's Horizon Engine will now evolve into something stronger, faster, smarter, the Phoenix Suite. The screens behind me lit up with mock-ups, previews, branding slides. The room came alive with interest. We're not just leading the industry, we're reshaping it. I stepped back as the applause broke out, crisp and sharp. Not performative. Genuine. After the conference, I was ushered into a smaller media room for interviews, handshakes, follow-ups. I could barely keep track of the hands I shook, the congratulations I received, or the journalists who tried to corner me for a soundbite. One, a woman from Tech and Vision Weekly, approached with a sly smile. A mess. Quinn, she said, recorder already running. How does it feel, being pushed out of the company you built and now returning as its top executive under a different flag? I met her gaze evenly. It feels correct, I said. Not triumphant. Not vindictive. Just right. She nodded slowly, satisfied. And it was true. I didn't feel the surge of revenge I once thought I would. This wasn't a victory lap. It was a restoration. Like a dislocated bone finally snapping back into place. By the end of the day, the internet was ablaze. Fired founder becomes boss. Serena Quinn reclaims her throne. The Queen returns, Correlytics now under NovaForge control. The headlines screamed vindication, but I didn't need them to tell me what I already knew. This wasn't about proving anything to the world. This was about me proving something to myself, that I could survive the fire, rebuild from nothing, and come back with more than they ever thought I could hold. Back at NovaForge HQ, Carmen and I stood in the new command center for Phoenix. Monitors blinked with live data, dashboards lit up like a city at night. Tanya was running a sprint review with the dev team. Jordan was mapping UX updates on the digital whiteboard. Every department pulsed with energy. This, Carmen said, handing me a tumbler of whiskey, is what they thought they could steal. I took the glass, letting it warm in my hand. They tried to erase me. And instead, she said, raising her own glass, you rewrote the ending. We clinked glasses, the sound a soft, final punctuation mark. Later that evening, I stood in my new office, sleek, twice the size of my old one at Correlytics, perched higher, with a view that stretched so far I could almost see the exact skyline where my career had first begun. My phone buzzed, hundreds of messages flooding in. But one stood out. A simple text from Tanya. We're proud of you. I stared at it for a long moment, something tightening in my chest. Not grief. Not even relief. Just peace. Because I hadn't done this alone. I had led, yes. But it was their belief in me, loyal, quiet, unshakable, that carried me forward. That built the bridge from destruction to triumph. The takeover was complete. The crown had been returned, not through force, but through vision. And now, the kingdom was mine again. The city glowed beneath me like a sea of fireflies, soft, alive, full of possibilities. From the penthouse balcony, I could see every curve of the skyline, every flickering light a reminder of how far I'd come. The glass in my hand was filled with a deep, amber whiskey, its warmth matching the quiet fire that lived in my chest now. Not anger. Not revenge. Power. Carmen stood beside me, similarly silhouetted against the cityscape. She held her own glass, and for a moment, we didn't speak. We just breathed, two women who had clawed through glass ceilings and boardroom betrayals to stand in the sky. To those who tried to bury me, I said quietly, raising my glass just slightly. She smiled. And to those who never saw it coming, we clinked glasses. The ice shifted in mine, delicate and sharp. I took a sip and let the burn settle on my tongue. Below us, NovaForge's tower lights illuminated the street like a beacon. Corelytics's logo had already been removed from its old headquarters. In less than a week, the transition would be final. Everything Miles had tried to steal, everything Delilah thought she could wear like a crown, it was mine now. Not because I had taken it back. Because I had built something stronger in its place. You know, Carmen said, turning slightly to look at me, you could walk away right now. Retire. Write your book. Live on a beach for the next 10 years. I smirked. Tempting. But you won't, she said, eyes glinting. Because this is just the beginning. She was right. Even now, my mind was already moving, mapping the future, spinning threads of innovation into strategies no one else had thought of yet. Phoenix was just one engine. There were others I hadn't even begun to design. Predictive tech was still in its infancy. With the right infrastructure, the right minds, the right freedom, we could revolutionize how the world functioned. Do you remember, I asked, the first time we met? Carmen laughed. How could I forget? Vegas. AI Summit. You crushed that panel on real-time behavioral analytics. And you called my approach idealistic during the Q&A. You glared at me like you were going to dismantle me on the spot. I almost did. We both chuckled, sipping our drinks, two women who had once been on opposite sides of a battlefield and now stood shoulder to shoulder atop the empire we helped each other build. I admired you even then, Carmen said. Because you didn't flinch. Not when I challenged you. Not when the panel tried to talk over you. Not when they treated you like a guest at your own revolution. I didn't have the luxury to flinch, I replied. I was the only woman in the room with my name on a patent. Well, now you're the only woman in the room with her name on a dynasty. That word settled deep in my bones. Dynasty. It wasn't just about building a company anymore. It was about building a legacy, something that outlasted quarterly reports and boardroom politics. Something that shaped the world long after I was gone. Behind us, the penthouse was quiet, the buzz of the press conference long gone. Tanya and the rest of the team had left hours ago after our private toast. The official documents were signed. The transition was sealed. And in just a few days, the NovaForge predictive division would be public, trading under a new symbol. P10X. Like the myth. Like the message. From fire, rebirth. I leaned on the balcony railing and watched a plane cross the sky in the distance, its blinking lights cutting across the night like a promise in motion. Miles was probably watching the press coverage from some hotel room, glass in hand, wondering where it all went wrong. Delilah was likely halfway across the country already, trading fake smiles for handshakes, trying to rebrand herself as a visionary instead of a parasite. Let them. I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about the next 10 years. About predictive health systems. Citywide traffic anticipation grids. Behavioral patterning for education. All ideas born from a woman they tried to silence. All of it now mine to shape. Carmen stepped back inside, leaving me alone with the skyline and my thoughts. I took one last sip and held the glass in both hands, savoring the quiet. The fight was over. The empire had begun. And I would lead it with clarity, with strength, and with the knowledge that I didn't rise because of them. I rose in spite of them,